only survived, but thrived. So let's get started.
Welcome to the Open Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host.
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, I'm really excited about our guest today because she's not only had a loss, but she's gone on to really make a lot of meaning out of it because she's worked on developing a new app called the Grief app. So we're going to talk about her life and how she got to the point where she's into this technology. So it's pretty interesting and exciting, isn't it, Heidi?
It's very exciting. It's very exciting what's going on nowadays on the internet and how much support you can get. And this app is certainly a way to get valuable support. And as you know, Mom, sometimes we're grieving in the middle of the night. Sometimes nobody's around. Sometimes we don't have any support. But with this app, you've always got something to turn to in your darkest moments. And there's a lot of amazing, valuable evidence-based research on this app.
All right, so Heidi, you want to introduce our guest and let's get started about her life, her journey, and what she's come up with.
I'd love to. So, as you said, Mom, we're going to talk about online grief support today. And our guest is Saundra Neperud. Saundra's mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and died just 8 months later. 11 years after that, her husband was told he might have stage 4 cancer also, but he died before the biopsy results even came back. Saundra struggled to find effective grief support and eventually connected with Emily Danekas, a licensed therapist specializing in grief. Together, they combine personal and professional insights to develop the Grief app. Welcome to our podcast, Saundra.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you on now.
I'm living in a travel van.
She's living in a travel van because she's traveling around doing her thing. Okay, so let's get back. You are in Maine. You and your hubby are running a bed and breakfast up there, right?
Yep, we had a 30-room hotel on 8 acres right on Route 1, which goes from Portland to Acadia National Park. Wiscasset Woods Lodge was the name of it. Wiscasset is near Red's Eats, which is the famous lobster roll place in Maine.
So you're living your dream.
I loved it. I truly loved running the hotel. It was a great experience. We had 50% return customers, so we had this huge clientele that would come back to us 2 or 3 times a year. We knew their lives and they knew our lives. I truly loved what we were doing, but after we made it through COVID, which was really difficult when you owned a hotel and the state shut down, my husband turned to me and he said that he didn't want to die in Maine. And at the time, I thought he was just referring to COVID. I thought that was kind of a fear of COVID. But I wasn't going to fight him at that point in time. So we put the hotel up for sale. Took a year to sell it. We moved to Spokane, Washington, to be closer to his family in the West. And he started to have backaches. And within a year and a half of moving to Spokane, he was dead. So it was a really fast. He had 5 weeks from when we first knew that something might be wrong. 4 weeks after we knew something might be wrong, he was in emergency surgery. He came out of emergency surgery, and a day later they said his kidneys had failed and that they couldn't do dialysis because dialysis would kill him. And if they didn't do dialysis, that would kill him. So he survived 8 days after the surgery.
So it was a very sudden death. This is very bizarre how quickly he died.
Well, it was colon cancer.
How old was Eric when he died?
59.
Wow, that's a really traumatic story. And how old were you at that time, being all of a sudden a widow?
54.
Was married. That's young.
I was married at 42.
Okay.
So I was married old and widowed young. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You hadn't been married you've been married, what, 12 years or something? I mean, that's a really tragic story.
It is.
Yeah.
And so you moved away from Maine, which was you were fairly new in Spokane, really.
So it was kind of the worst of everything because, grief doesn't just come, from death. It comes from loss. And having to give up the hotel was really hard. I did it because it was important to the marriage. It was important to my husband. But I went through a lot of grief of all of that loss of my career, of my feeling of contributing. I was trying to start up a career in real estate as kind of a compromised career. And that was just barely getting off the ground. I had my first client, 2 clients. I had to give them up because I was afraid I would mess up somebody's biggest purchase of their life because my brain wasn't in it anymore. So I'd lost my career, barely knew anyone, and then I lost my husband. So it was, and I lost his family. They left me. They drove away and left me to care for my husband on my own. And so
Wow.
it was a lot of loss all at once.
And you didn't have your mother to even help you because she had died, what, 11 years earlier of cancer also.
The same cancer. Yeah.
Wow. The same cancer. That's ironic.
Oh, what are you doing? You're there. How did you
Mm-hmm.
tell us how you picked yourself up?
Oh, well, so my sister flew out, and she was huge. I don't know that I could have done it without her coming out. She came out and she stayed with me through the 8 days of Eric's life, and then a month afterwards. But anyone that's gone through grief kind of knows that you're just in such a brain fog. A lot of times you just want to be alone. Like it was, your life has kind of been shattered, and you've got to figure out how to rebuild. What do you want your life to look like going forward? So some of it was just taking time, and luckily
Mm-hmm.
I had the financial means to be able to take time and kind of regroup and figure things out. But I really did struggle to find that emotional support. Like you said, there was no grief groups that I could go to. Hospice had dropped me kind of through a miscommunication, so there was no follow-up from hospice. My counselor that I sought out had no grief experience, so I went 3 times to her, but it felt like she was just throwing spaghetti against a wall, like to see what stuck.
My husband died almost 6 years ago now, and I was lucky because I got set up by Cara in Palo Alto, California, with a therapist who had not only had a spouse die, but a child. So I had had the same, and oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, he was an amazing support for me during that time, I'll have to say. But I got into a grief group with them, and it didn't work for me. So I
Oh,
would say that not everything's going to work for you. A group might, an individual, but you got to find somebody who knows what they're doing, right?
you've got to find something. It's so hard
Mm-hmm.
to navigate on your own. The group I did end up finding was just a widows group on Facebook, and they were locally based, which is nice. So we could meet up in person, and I got really
Oh, that's
involved in that and
nice.
started leading activities where people would come to my house.
Mm-hmm.
So that was huge, just because you know my sister really wanted to support me. She really did, but for me to start to talk about all of the different aspects of the loss, it was too much. It was too much because she didn't have the grounding for it. Whereas the grief group, everyone had been through kind of that same traumatic background. And so you could start from there and move forward rather than
Mm-hmm.
trying to explain all of the
Right.
levels of loss.
Yeah. And the financial stuff and the mail and
The
settling all
first
the.
time that you've got to put down your marital status on a form at the doctor's office, the first time you get a piece of mail with your husband's name on it. Yeah. And so that group was really nice, but as you said, I am a young widow. And
Mm-hmm.
so in some ways, most of the widows were in a different stage of life than I was in
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, so then kind of so there's 2 things that have really been kind of my saving grace. One of which is that I had never actually owned a house before I got married. I had a lot of work that was seasonal. I worked in national parks, national forests. Um,
You're
and so
also in Peace Corps, right?
I was also in Peace Corps. Yep. I also went back to Thailand after the tsunami and worked again. Um,
Wow.
so, so there's a lot of moving around in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so settling in a house was part of that relationship. But once he was gone and I realized that that was no longer a compromise I needed to make, I looked at then how did I want my life to move forward. I waited a year, and I think that is smart. My mom, when she got divorced, said you're kind of crazy your first year out from a divorce, and so that's why you shouldn't make any decisions. So I did wait that year to sell the house because that is a really big thing that you kind of can't take back if you change your mind later. It went out. I flew out to his birthday, my birthday, and Valentine's Day. We're all within 10 days of each other. And so that first February, he died in late October. And that first February after his death, I knew I didn't want to be in my house alone for those 3 days all in a row. So I flew out to Florida, met up with a friend of mine, and we rented a van like this. And we traveled around Florida for 10 days together in the van.
Mhm.
And so that was when I knew that that's what I wanted to do, was to buy the van and to give myself that freedom to roam again. And
Wow.
so I used his life insurance policy, and I make a face of that because I could never talk Eric into buying a motorhome. Like, I really wanted one since I was 18. Couldn't talk him into it. Once he was gone, that was no longer a compromise we needed to make. And so I bought myself the motorhome. I stayed close by that first year and did like week-long travels, but kept going back home. And that really helped, like, emotionally, because I was able to explore, have new things. And it wasn't always those memories of him like coming up everywhere. You could
Right.
go somewhere
You're in
where you
different
weren't
places.
constantly, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
it.
was huge.
But you
And then,
worked with national parks, let me say for people,
yes.
right? So you knew about driving around in remote areas and where you could camp and where you could take your mobile home and the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and there was a great app, iOverlander, that gives you all the resources too. So there's so many apps nowadays. And then the
Hopefully
second
it
thing
was an
that really
accident.
helped actually was developing the app. I've
Well,
always,
I'm going to stop you for a minute,
okay.
Saundra, before we go into the app, because Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, who you may know, who has written a lot of research and a book on the grieving brain, talks about how we need to create new memories. And that's what you did. You
Yeah.
created new memories in places where your husband hadn't been.
Yeah.
Now you're
And it was
going into
also
the,
something to look forward to as well.
mm-hmm.
So there was always something more exciting you could go do. So those little things helped too, because then you had the expectation of something coming up rather than just looking back into the past.
Right. So tell us how you got the app idea.
I came upon the app idea on accident. A year after his death, somebody was showing me an app that they had used to help stop drinking. And I was looking at that app and the functions that it had, and I started thinking, well, if you tweak some of these things, they could actually be useful for someone going through grief. And so then I started to think, does this exist? Like, has somebody else invented this and I just missed it in my own searching for something? Did a lot of research. There really wasn't what I was looking at. I started to think, what is an app good at? And how can what an app is good at be helpful to someone in grief? And a lot of the research I did into apps themselves said it's action. Apps are for something in the moment.
Mhm.
Whereas websites might be more background information or more long-term learning, apps are right now in the moment. What do you need? And so I started to look at like what had gotten me through Eric's loss. What had I turned to when I couldn't find other resources? And one of the things early on that everyone I talked to said was that you have to feel your emotions. You have to allow those emotions to come in and you have to feel them. And so I very specifically in the early days, when a grief wave would hit me, I would very specifically stop anything I was doing and just allow myself to feel it and breathe through it. And that was something early on I did. And so what we did for the grief app itself is we've got something called the grief wave, and it's essentially a very pretty timer. And the timer, the minimum amount is 1 minute, in the theory that anyone can do anything for 1 minute. So those people who are trying not to feel their emotions, we ask that they try to sit with them just for 1 minute. Goes up to 10 minutes. We ask that if you have a hard time leaving your grief, that you consider setting it for 10 minutes and then giving yourself permission to try to move on to a different headspace at that point in time. But the whole thing is, every time it hits, sit with it, breathe through it, feel whatever it is. There's so many emotions in grief. And so that was a big one that pretty much everyone I talked to said that we really needed to make sure that was part of it.
It's interesting that you say that because Heidi and I wrote a book called Real Men Do Cry with Eric Hipple, who was a quarterback for the Detroit Lions, and he goes down in his basement and sets a timer in the evening to grieve his son Jeff. So that totally
Wow.
then.
Yeah, that's neat.
Mhm.
The other thing that I did a lot of is memories of Eric would come up, and they were bittersweet, but I was wanting to share them. Like, this is my husband, this is his life, these are my memories that I had with him. so I was putting posts on Facebook, but my friends on Facebook would take that as like a call for help. And so then they would react in a way I wasn't really looking for. I wasn't looking for, oh, poor you. I was looking for, hey, this was my husband. Look at what a neat person he was. Look at all these neat things we did together. And so that was what inspired me to do the memory book, because I wanted there to be a place to do exactly that, to gather those pictures, to tell those stories, to get that person's life down on paper, because you just want to do that. It's just this need to commemorate, to process. And so that's where that one came from, was just the need to tell a story.
I love what you just said, that if you put it on Facebook, people see it as a call for help. It's not just honoring. That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where that one came from. The Give Me a Break section came really from my experience with a lot of the widows in the widows group, where they would really have a hard time allowing themselves to take a break from grief. This whole thing where you feel guilty if you feel good, if you aren't kind of constantly feeling bad. And so I really wanted, and this was actually part of the drinking app, was the ability to just distract your mind, to give it that break.
I
And so
remember
that's
saying to my therapist, the guy I was telling you about, I'm feeling too good today. I'm not sure if that's okay.
you feel really guilty. You do.
Yeah.
And so that's also then where the whole good moment came from, because on the way to my husband's, he died in Spokane, but we buried him in Oregon next to his father. And so I had his ashes with me, and my sister was accompanying me to Oregon, and she had never seen the area. So we did touristy things because, there was my sister. She was in Oregon for the first time. And so I remember being out on Cannon Beach, and her and I taking a picture of us in front of that
I
rock.
love
And
Cannon Beach. Beautiful.
because we honeymooned right near there. Eric and I honeymooned very close
Yeah.
to there. But you feel guilty. You feel like it's wrong. You feel like it's an indication that you didn't love the person.
Right.
And so we're really trying to normalize the fact that it is okay that grief and joy can coexist. It is perfectly fine and healthy to have those moments of joy, because the grief will come back to you. The grief needs to be processed. It'll find you again. You don't have to stay in it.
Oh, I like what you said. It needs to be practiced. Yes.
Well, and like you said, Saundra, it's all connected to, evidence-based research, because the dual process model shows you that you can only stay in grief for so long. You're going back and forth between grief and joy, like you're saying. So these two things can exist together, which I love, because people don't realize it, even though they're living it.
Right. And then the final thing was really Emily, the grief therapist that is on the team. She really wanted the journaling thing. And so we made it a verbal journal, because we're really trying to bear in mind that people have grief brain, or I used to call it widow's brain. You've got brain fog, you're exhausted, you can't think clearly. And so everything on the app we tried to make it as simple as possible, knowing that you can't really problem solve very well. But we went to the audio journal because we knew that people were going to have a hard time necessarily writing, but we wanted them just to be able to turn something on and just talk through whatever it is you're experiencing in the moment. So you can talk up to 15 minutes for one recording, and it transcribes it so that you have it in writing in case for any reason you want to go back and look at it. But you can also tag things. So this kind of gets back to what we're talking about. So many therapists don't necessarily have a grief background, and who you get for your therapist sometimes depends on who your insurance is. So we've really tried to make the app usable for a therapist. For a therapist that doesn't have a grief background, they can use this as a tool when working with their clients. And so part of this is tagging it, so that if you've had this moment where you've had a revelation or you've got a problem you can't solve, you can tag it so that when you go to see your therapist and you're still in grief brain, you can pull up your tags and go, okay, this is the thing that happened that I really want to talk with you about. Same thing for the workbook exercises, is to tag it so that when you're with your therapist, you can talk through whatever you learned.
Will it repeat it verbally, or do they read it, your therapist?
So you can do either. You can either play the button and it'll read, and it'll play the
I like
audio.
that. Yeah, that's lovely.
Me too.
Final thing is the workbooks, and I just kind of touched on those a little bit, but we really don't talk about grief in America, which you guys know. My mother and my mother-in-law were both widowed. In fact, my mother was widowed at the same age I was widowed, which I
Wow.
realized when I went to see her headstone. And her husband died at the same age that Eric died. And I I was an adult when all of this happened, and I know so little about what my mother went through and what my mother-in-law went through. And so when suddenly you're in grief, you you don't know what's normal. You have all of these emotions and they seem crazy to you. Like I was really mad at my husband for several reasons. And how can I be mad at the person I loved
Right.
who passed away?
He didn't get medical help soon enough.
He never got a colonoscopy
Right,
the whole life. He never had
right,
one.
right.
Um so I I really wanted just some basic background so that you understand what a grief wave is and how to go through it. You talk about all the different emotions and normalize it. It's okay. These are common things that people have. These are some of the things you're going to experience. If once you're ready to start trying to rebuild your life, here are some tools or things to look at as to how you want your life to look like going forward. So we 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 did these workbook activities, and right now by the time people see this, they should all be there, but they're interactive. And so instead of just simply being like a prompt and having people write after it, every single one of them it gives you the little bit of background, very short, because again, people are in grief brain. And then it actually has you look at your life in comparison to whatever that topic is. So, like, how you respond to this loss can be affected by your previous losses. And so we have them list previous losses, death, um, loss of a relationship because you've moved away, loss of a relationship because you're estranged from someone, loss of a career. We have them list off their losses. And then for each one of those, we have them say how they grieved that loss, if they did or didn't grieve it. And then at the end, we kind of have them look at the whole thing and say, okay, what does this mean for me right now? So every part of it is interactive. So it's not just the background, but then how does this apply to me
I
personally?
like that, Sandra. And I'm wondering, in your own story, did the death of your mom change in any way how you reacted to the death of your husband?
I felt guilty because they died of the same cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so why didn't I pick up on the fact that my husband had
Mm,
cancer sooner? While losing your husband so quickly was hard, I did get a chance to say goodbye to him.
mm-hmm.
My mother suffered for 8 months knowing that she was going to die. And so
Mm,
in some ways I was thankful that my husband
yeah.
didn't go through that 8 months of
Mm-hmm.
pain. But no, I can't say actually that I did a good job of grieving my mother's loss.
Mm-hmm.
I we had we were just about to move. I was newlywed because she was diagnosed 2 weeks after we got engaged. So we ended up eloping because there was no wedding that could really be had. She was already in so much pain
Mm-hmm.
um, that it just wasn't going to work out. And I wasn't, it was a weird thing because do you wait for her to die and then have a wedding celebration? Do you have a wedding that
Yeah.
she might not be able to attend because that's just a really hard day for her? So we did elope, and then we had gotten new jobs and had moved to Montana. And so I did the thing of busying myself. And I know that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people do that. I mean, it's a simple way. You don't have to feel your emotions because there's so much going on in your life. And so I can
Yeah.
say that I don't think I did a good job at all of processing her death. And so I've had a lot more thoughts and reflections on it after the loss of my husband than I did at the time.
So if you had one piece of advice for somebody who's had a recent loss, what would it be?
Again, I think I tell people there's three things, but the number one thing is just to feel your emotions, just
Mhm.
to let yourself feel them. And whatever you are feeling, it is okay. Don't judge yourself for it, just feel it.
I love it. And do you have a website that people can go
So we do
to?
have a website. It is thegriefApp.com.
All right. Well, Saundra, thank you so much for being on the show today and for all the good works that you've done. And it's pretty amazing. It's impressive.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you for giving people hope through the Grief app. please, everybody, go out and get the Grief app because it sounds like a phenomenal resource to use after a loss.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Heidi and I want to thank you all for joining our show today. And we want to remind you always that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.